Morgan here. So I'm actually standing in front of my freezer. It's just like, looks like just a big white wall on the, it's a freezer. So today's video, we're going to be talking about preserving stuff. I need like a whole bunch of stickers on here. We got that. I bought some coffee and they just got that, but I need like a whole bunch of stickers. Just need to sticker this whole thing up. All right. Anyway, so today's video, we're going to be talking about different ways to preserve food. So there's definitely freezer. That's one way that we rely on. We run completely on solar. And a lot of people don't believe us when we tell them that we run our freezer on solar. It's actually incredibly energy efficient. Even in the summer, it's, this is completely run on solar. All we have is run on solar. Our cooking is propane, but other than that, everything we do is run on solar. And so if you do have a freezer, and you want to continue using it, year round, even without, being tied to a grid or something, then really look into solar or any alternative energy. If your area is really windy, get a wind generator or something like that. Look into alternative options to keep that freezer going. When it comes to preserving food, back in the old days, before freezers and canning and dehydrating and all this stuff came out, people would want to preserve food from like the harvest, right? So whatever they grew, they just wanted to preserve so that it lasted through the winter, so that it lasted through that season, so that they would get to the spring and start planting and do the whole process over again, right? They wanted to preserve it so that it lasted, throughout that winter, so that it kept them, going. In times in which they couldn't have that garden, they didn't have the technology, they didn't have the ability to have the garden or anything like that during the winter time, right? So, when it came to preserving back then, it was just, they needed a cold storage. They needed a basement. They needed some underground, place or some cool place in the hills or something like that. They needed something to keep it cool just for that, short period of time. Now, when we talk about preserving food, especially for like long-term prepping purposes, we want it to last our entire lifetime, okay? This is the attitude that I get a lot when it comes to, people talking about preserving food. They're like, well, I want it to last my entire life. I have to rotate this, I have to do this. Yeah, like food does go bad, especially fresh food. So we're always looking for ways to keep it lasting longer, to get it to last longer so that we can have access to it, for a longer period of time, right? I mean, that's been the goal of humans for a long time. That's why they smoke the meat and they've made jerky. They understand that, when they killed that animal or something, they probably weren't going to use all the meat right then and there, right? Even for a village, if they got a deer, they would still, process the deer and smoke the meat and cook the meat in stews and things like this. And they would salt the meat, and they would do all these things to help preserve it for longer periods, So that was the goal. And that's the goal still today. We want our food to last as long as possible. So, we've come up with all these methods of canning and dehydrating, freeze drying, and all these methods. And a freezer, I mean, these methods are amazing these days with our modern conveniences of ways to preserve food. It's fantastic what we can do these days. The Mylar bags and the oxygen absorbers to keep our food lasting for 30 plus years. It's mind-boggling what we can do these days. But we have to be realistic about our food, okay? We want our food to last a very long time, okay? But certain food won't. Certain food's not going to last forever. Certain food may only last 6 months, a year. Certain food could last 30 plus years. It could last your entire lifetime. But we also have to understand that a lot of these things will last even longer or could last our entire lifetime if stored in those ideal, perfect conditions. You know what I'm saying? So, and a lot of us don't have those ideal, perfect conditions. Even in a basement or cold storage, these things still aren't supposed to last like your entire lifetime. You're still supposed to be rotating food, eat what you have, produce more food through gardening and hunting and fishing and whatever. You're supposed to be pretty consistently, getting the new food stores, the new food sources, so that you're eating your preserves, and then preserving that new stuff, constantly rotating it. Okay. So we do have to be realistic with our food expectations. even with these preservation methods that I'm about to talk about, some of them, they really don't last forever. A lot of frozen food, a lot of people want to think that it lasts forever, but it doesn't. A lot of, freeze-dried food can last an extremely long time, absolutely. But a lot of the methods that I'm mentioning, they only last, a few months or 6 months, but that's longer than it would have lasted if you hadn't done that preservation method. Anyway, regardless of that, so there are lots of other ways to do it. You can can. Now, canning is actually a fairly new invention. As far as preservation methods go. And a lot of people used to do canning over the fire, water bath canning, and even pressure canning over the fire. But we do have to understand that even though that is possible over a fire and propane and stuff like that, it's going to be way different than if you were to do it like over an electric stove or even like a controlled propane, stove, something like that. You still have to adjust the temperature a lot. Especially with a fire, you have to be very, very conscious and aware if you are going to do that. Definitely try it now. But I think canning is definitely possible with these other heat options. We just have to be very aware of how it's going to work and, safely do it. We need to understand that we need to safely preserve in those canning methods so that, we don't run the risk of botulism, so that they're actually canned properly. Okay. And keeping that, temperatures right is a really big deal. So outside of canning, then there's freeze drying. Okay, I like how I jumped from canning to freeze drying. If you are able to get a freeze dryer, do it. Invest in a freeze dryer and start freeze drying your own stuff. I just think that freeze drying food is just the bee's knees. I think it's amazing. If you can invest in it, do it. Now, I want to invest in a freeze dryer, but I want it to run completely on solar. So we have to upgrade our solar a little bit in order to run our freeze dryer. In fact, I can't even run a dehydrator, which a dehydrator is next on the list. I can't even run my dehydrator completely on solar right now. It takes a lot of power. So I have to up our solar needs in order to run our dehydrator. I have a solar dehydrator. You can have a traditional dehydrator or you can have a solar dehydrator. You can make that. Dehydrate with the sun. Dehydrating with the sun is something that people used to do all the time. They would cure meats in the sun. They would dry their herbs. They dry things in the sun all the time. So dehydrating in the sun is not hard. We made that little solar dehydrator. It works amazing. You can also smoke stuff, like especially smoking meats, like smoking jerky and salmon and meats and all these things. Smoking is a really good option. You can just buy like a smoker, an electric or propane smoker, but you could also learn how to smoke over a fire. Not an exactly difficult process, just something that you should definitely practice if that's something you want to do. Also, there are other preservation methods that are so very interesting. You can preserve in wine, you can preserve in oil, you can preserve in salt. Now, we have to understand that, when we are using these preservation methods, that we're taking one resource and using it for another. Like I am using the resource of the sun to power, to charge our batteries, which keeps our freezer going. Okay, that's a resource. So we have to understand these resources that we're using in order to preserve. Okay. So the salting method actually takes a lot of salt. So if you are thinking of using a salting method like salting eggs and stuff like that to preserve it, you have to understand that the salt is going to get into the eggs. Okay. You also have to understand the amount of salt it takes to actually salt eggs, to preserve them in that method. You can also use vinegar to preserve. And vinegar is not a hard process, but it's definitely something that you should, again, know how to do. It's like a whole distilling process and things like that. Now you can make apple cider vinegar, which can preserve certain things, but not as much as just regular vinegar. Like you could preserve eggs in vinegar, things like that. So, of course, any basement or cold storage, anything that has a mostly controlled, cooler environment will help to preserve the food. So there is a book that I recently acquired called Preserving Food Without Freezing or Canning. And this book is eye-opening, and I actually collected a few things because of this book. It talked about preserving in all these different ways, and I was blown away about these ways. And not only did I start storing more of that stuff, but I started looking into ways to actually make that stuff myself, so that I'm not just storing it, which I'm doing, but that later down the road, if I ever need, these methods to preserve, is good. But I'm also looking at cold storage methods, things like that. We are planning to do some testing of cold storage out here in the desert. But in the meantime, we are relying on our solar to help us out with this freezer here. And I'm definitely going to be preserving things in other ways and test these methods too, If you want to preserve eggs in vinegar, then actually go do it, But again, like those things, they probably won't last forever, especially if you're not buying canned pickled eggs or something like that, that could potentially last longer, or whatever the case may be. So look into these various methods. I'm going to put a link down below to that book. I want you to really go look at that book. It's a huge eye-opener. I'm not sponsored by the book or anything, but it is an affiliate link for Amazon. So I got the Kindle version. If you can find a used book for under like $50, good for you. I've been trying to get the physical book for a long time, but I've only been able to find it for like 40 or $50. So I'm on the lookout for a physical hard copy of it, but I have the ebook version and it's amazing. So anyway, I just want you to start thinking of other options and also understand the realities of preserving food, short-term and long-term, and what your actual reasons are for preserving these food. A lot of things you may want to preserve long-term, like rice and sugars and things like that. And then other things maybe you want to preserve short-term, like maybe canned goods, you'll rotate every couple of years, you'll rotate regularly, you want to pickle those eggs because you like pickled eggs, you want to eat them, and that's a good way to preserve and then eat them, regularly. You want to pickle cucumbers because pickles are delicious, and you want to do these things because you not only enjoy them, but it helps them last a little bit longer and outside of their fresh form. So, but definitely, one of the best, more natural ways is cold storage, basements, things like that are underground, or any type of cooled area. I'm thinking about doing an adobe an adobe food storage above ground and seeing if that it could be good above ground cold storage. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how all this goes. Thank you all so much for watching. I just wanted to offer some ideas and get you guys thinking and looking at other ways to preserve food, whether short term or long term. Even if you're wanting to preserve something for a few months, it's more than it would have lasted like a few days. You know what I mean? A few days versus a few months, that's amazing. Okay. So don't worry whether it's just like, well, I can't preserve this egg for, 50 years. Don't worry about that. Find ways to preserve it for a few months and then go get your own chicken so you have a plentiful supply, right? Thank you all so much for watching. Conquer tomorrow by preparing today. I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.